Marathi writings. It's going to be a paper coupled with a PowerPoint presentation. So please bear with me as I try to share my screen with you. Yes, I hope the screen is visible. So this is what I would like to tackle with in this presentation today, royals in Marathi writings. And I'll be reading out from the paper that I have prepared for this conference especially. Um, 99 years ago, on the 29th of January 1922, the Mahad Parishad of Central Provinces and Berar held a 3-day session in Nagpur. It was supposed to discuss the usual issues pertaining social, political, and educational progress of the untouchables. But the unusual highlight of the session, which specially found mention in the public advertisement on the front page of the weekly newspaper Vijay Maratha, which you can see on your screens, was that the son of, and I quote, the son of our most revered Badshah, the Prince of Wales, is scheduled to visit Nagpur on the 30th of January. Hence, the representatives of the Mahar Brethren are exhorted not to miss the opportunity to have a darshan, a sighting of the prince, unquote. Such public displays of affection for the British royals by the colonial Indian subjects do not find any place in the popular imagination of the history of modern India today. This, in spite of the fact that an average Marathi student, Maharashtrian student in a Maharashtra State Board school, learns the history of the Indian freedom struggle at least thrice before they matriculate. This hypomnesia, the underrepresentation of memories which do not conform to the anti-colonial narrative, is understandable for a post-colonial society, of course. Such a monochromatic representation of the struggle for creation of the Indian nation, as if it was an epic battle between the good nationalists and the bad colonialists, has engendered a constricted understanding of the Indian modernity in general and the processes involved in the making of the Indian nation in particular. The present paper is an attempt to read the various references to the British royals in modern Marathi writings, broadly ranging between 1848, Shatapatre, and 1922, the Vijay Maratha. I argue that the polyphonic Marathi writings about the English royalty are indicative of the various ways in which the natives negotiated with the colonial power. Some wanted their own traditional privileges to continue, others voiced gratitude for their newfound avenues of emancipation, still others paid respectful lip service, and some even dared to criticize the royals. It is further argued that retrospective nationalist motives cannot and should not be ascribed to these writings. The text consulted for this particular paper, it is hoped, will offer an opportunity for us to understand the various points of view about the British royalty as manifested in the world of Marathi speakers, ranging from the harsh critical to the unabashedly loyalist, with many shades in between. This variety might make us aware of the multi-hued nature of the colonial Indian society, which responded to the colonial realities in many different ways. The conveniently labeled extremists can be seen here, writing heartfelt obituaries for the Queen, and the reformers who have been accused of fraternizing with the enemy have cited historical examples of English kings being forced to accept popular demands for political rights. Such variety. It is hoped that a survey of this variety of sources may help us understand the reasons behind the present-day contestations about the events from the colonial past. It is further hoped that this might eventually help us refashion the narratives of our history which are created for public consumption. Finally, such a sensitive and textured understanding of the colonial past may help us realize that Indian modernity and the creation of the Indian nation are phenomena that have come into being as a result of multiple interests, objectives, and methods. The yardsticks of modern nationalism are not applicable universally and monolithically. One of the earliest authors to speak up about the colonial conquest was Lokahitavadi, writing his 108 letters to the editor of the weekly Prabhakar, Shatapatri. Having served as a colonial administrator, Lokahitavadi is usually understood as an author who advocated rigorous social reforms and offered a stinging self-critique of the high castes for being selfish and parochial, and thus responsible for the loss of political power. As such, he is seen as an admirer of the English in general. However, when it comes to the matters of governance and administration, Lokahitavadi opined that the colonial rule was in fact an opportunity to bring about political and social reform. He cited examples of King John and the demand for Magna Carta, King Charles and the popular uprising against him, as also the exile of King James. Juxtaposing them against the Indian understanding of monarchy, he opined, and I quote, "Such uprisings have been unheard of in India." He quoted the Sanskrit maxim, and I quote, "Raja harati sarvasvam tatraka paridevana." When the king robs you of everything, is lamenting not futile? Unquote. However, he argued that one can look up to the examples of the English kings and the people and learn that it is indeed possible to initiate political reforms and to bring a king down on his knees if he pursues repressive policies. Thus, as early as 1850, with the aim of improving the Indian polity and administration, Lokahitavadi was citing the cases of popular pressure influencing the English royals. It certainly is a novel way of advocating reforms, which has not been given due visibility in the history of Indian modernity. Writing within 20 years of the Shatapatre, but unlike Lokahitavadi, Jyotirao Phule, Mahatma Phule as he is popularly known as, Jyotirao Phule did not seem to advocate the idea of the English royals as rulers that need to be reined in. Sincerely believing the Queen Victoria's proclamation of 1858, Phule felt that improving the lives of the downtrodden people was a responsibility which needed to be shouldered by the Queen. In his tract called The Cunning of Brahmins, Brahmanansi Kasab, published in 1869, Phule exhorted the Queen to be answerable for the loss of livelihood as experienced by the debt-ridden cultivators. As he stated in no uncertain terms, the onus was on the Queen herself. He lauded the initiative of the Queen as she set an example for the world by abolition of slavery and asked her to visit and grant freedom for the enslaved people. Contrary to the popular imagination of being an Anglophile, Phule did not mince words as he asked the Queen, and I quote, "How can you sleep peacefully when you are the owner of the flock?" Unquote. "धन्य राणीबाई झोप कशी घेई आहेस मोर्चाची धनीण खास सोडवी दीन बंधूस." The Ballad of Chhatrapati Shivaji, composed in the same year, 1869, by Mahatma Phule, concluded with the indictment that the power of the Queen in India is not as alert as Phule would like it to be. This is because the Brahmanical power reigns supreme everywhere. Even the collectors cannot counter the authority of the Brahmin bureaucracy. Thus, Phule's engagement with the royals was not that of adulation and admiration alone. He admired the progressive elements of the British royalty, but did not flinch from making the royals aware of the ground reality. Later on in 1876, when Phule was invited for a dinner with the Prince of Wales, He shared the table, but chose to be dressed like an Indian farmer so as to draw the prince's attention to the farmer's plight. These examples from Lokahitavadi and Mahatma Phule demonstrate that their writings about the British royals need not be considered as those of loyalists and Anglophiles, but one may view them as the initial articulations of a dialogue with the colonial monarchs initiated by the subjects who sincerely believed that they were as much of British subjects as an Englishman living in England. The disillusionment began to set in the later years of the 19th century. The frank assertion for rights came to be replaced by docile avowals of loyalty to the crown, making respectful requests for the royal blessings by the descendants of former rulers who now signed off as the most humble servants of the English crown. In 1876, when the Prince of Wales visited India, Raghunath Rao Vittal Vinsurkar composed a Sanskrit poem entitled Srimad Prince of Walesasya Bharatavarsha Yatra Vruttam. Vinsurkar's epithets occupy 3 lines of the title page. He is a first-class Sardar, companion of the most exalted order of the Star of India, and the Raja Udmat ul Mulk Bahadur, quite a mouthful, considering that the Prince of Wales is named simply as the Prince of Wales. Anyway, the author composed the Sanskrit poem and also got it translated into English because he felt that, and I quote, "This book deserves to be read by cultivated minds, both natives and Europeans," unquote. The book in itself is a well-crafted panegyric describing in perfect metrical verses topics such as England Deshaha, Rajdhani, Victoria Rajni, Yuvaraja Pravasa Hetu, Bharat Desha Varnanam, Tasya Mumbaiyam Nivasaha, and Upasamhara. One of the couplets from the poem by Vinsurkar and the translation approved by Professor R.G. Bhandarkar no less, and I quote, "Verily was Victoria appointed to protect all the people of India by the great God out of his mercy, seeing them afflicted with irremediable miseries brought on by unjust kings." It may not be out of place, unquote. It may not be out of place to mention here that the author was a descendant of the famous Sardar Vinsurkar family, which served the Peshwas from whom the British had conquered most of the Bombay Presidency region, talking about unjust kings. This poem and the sentiments evoked therein are representative of the literature which addressed, described, and exhorted the English royals in the hope of gaining or continuing to receive what they thought were royal favors. There was another group of Indians who nurtured the hope that the royals would help them improve their lot. The Satyashodhak Samajists, followers of Mahatma Phule and his ideology. Throughout the reign of the Queen Victoria, they continued their attempts to communicate the living conditions of the Indian cultivators to the Queen. The Dinabandhu weekly newspaper of 7th October 1894 ran a poem hoping to communicate the lived experiences of the farmers with the Queen. The long reign of Queen Victoria meant that there was a large number of references to her in the literature of 19th century Maharashtra. Parshuram Pant Godbole, a collaborator of Major Thomas Candy, composed the following poem in her honor. सौख्याची पूर्ण खाणी चिरसमय असो आमुची मुख्य राणी विक्टोरिया निशाणी धरुणी चहूकडे चालती शुद्ध नाणी. It's not great poetry, of course, but Her Majesty's financial and military power is amply underlined in the wordy couplet. The biggest surprise for me while researching for the source materials was the emotionally charged editorial of Kesari, which was written by Lokmanya Tilak as an obituary to the Queen in 1901. The personal details about the Queen and her calm and composed demeanor, her sensitivity towards the Indian subjects, and such other virtues described in the editorial make one wonder if one is indeed reading the Kesari or not. It is no surprise then that a school teacher in a girls' school in Hatkanangle, near Kolhapur, wrote a poem entitled Rani Geet to honor the Malika Maazma Maharani Victoria. The author, though unrelated to the Lokmanya, is also called Govind Pandurang Tilak. The surname is similar. The first benevolent act of the Queen, praised by this poet, who is a school teacher, is the setting up of schools. Not irrelevant, considering that the poet is a schoolmaster. प्रजेवरी जीव प्राण प्रभूचा आम्हावरी जीव प्राण ज्ञानामृत हो प्यायासाठी केली स्कुले निर्माण. Not all praise for the Queen stemmed from personal gratitude though. Dondiram Namdev Kumbhar, an ardent Satyashodhak Samajist, wrote a tract entitled Vedachar, criticizing the high caste dominance within Hinduism. And he concludes the text with a poem saying, धन्य राणीबाई तुझ्या या राज्यात अज्ञानाप्रत दिले ज्ञान धोंडीराम नित्य गुणाते वाखाणी म्हणे धन्य राणीबाई तुझ. Praising the Queen for imparting knowledge. The gratitude for the Queen in this case stems from the fact that the Queen had indeed assured that modern education would be available for her subjects irrespective of their social status. Thus, it's important to understand that the motivating forces behind the Marathi speakers writing about the British royals were varied. The personal and the political were irreversibly intertwined. Going back to the Vijay Maratha issues of 1922 mentioned at the beginning of this paper, we find that the prince was welcomed by a number of organizations. The Patil Parishad of the Bombay Presidency passed a resolution welcoming the prince to India and affirming their allegiance to the royal crown. The resolution, Vijay Maratha reports, was received favorably by the prince. His secretary even communicated the prince's pleasure at the message of their allegiance and wrote that the prince was deeply concerned about the cause of the progress of the farmers and the Patils. The same issue reports that a public meeting of over 1500 Suryavamshi Matanga people was held in Kudal, Satara district. The first resolution was of allegiance to the crown. This was followed by the usual demands for compulsory education, decriminalization of certain castes and the like. A review of newspaper reports of this period shows that the first resolution of any such meetings would always proclaim Rajanishta, allegiance to the crown. The Indian organizations seem to have devised a formal and normalized procedure of conveying their grievances and demands to the king in the hope that he might indeed make a difference to their lot. Sometimes the personal details of the lives of the English royals were also published for public consumption. The panegyric by the schoolmaster Tilak mentions that the Queen gave birth to 9 children, of which 7 survived. The Vijay Maratha reports that the Badshah George had gifted jewelry worth 200,000 pounds to his daughter Princess Mary as her wedding gift, and that the princess has also received from the Aga Khan visual binoculars to be used in the theatre. Here on the screen is another tract, a play really, which speaks about the Queen and how the Queen had sent, in her absence, the Queen had sent her son, Prince of Wales, to visit India and take a look, to try to understand the living conditions of her subjects. Sometimes one wonders if there is veiled criticism implied in the ostensible declarations of loyalty. For example, the following snippet from the Dinabandhu remarks that it indeed must be a cause of pleasure for all the loyal subjects of the Queen that a professor of chemistry managed to remove the tar from the tarnished face of the Queen's statue. विल्सन कॉलेजातील प्रोफेसर टी के गज्जर या गृहस्थांच्या प्रयत्नाने महाराणी साहेबांच्या पुतळ्यावरील डांबराचे दाग अजिबात निघाले. दीनबंधू 1898 September. To conclude, the English royals form the subject matter of a large body of literature in Marathi. These literary pieces offer an insight into the different emotive forces behind the addresses, descriptions, panegyrics, and criticisms aimed towards the royals. One needs to have a textured understanding of these sources, situating them in the contemporary ethos and the caste class location of the authors. Hasty generalizations and labeling of persons as loyalists or extremists are not useful, considering the surprises that these literary sources throw at the researchers. A detailed study of these and other source materials can enrich our understanding of the processes that led to the creation of the Indian nation. It may also be realized that Indian modernity was a product of a crisscross of emotive factors and not a uniform and chronological journey. Thank you.